Hello there, my friends. Let's pull up a chair and talk about one of the biggest questions humanity has ever asked. Where did all of this come from? Not just our planet or our sun, but everything, the whole cosmic shebang. Has the universe always been here, humming along in the dark? Or did it have a beginning? Philosophers and thinkers have wrestled with this for centuries, and one of the most elegant and straightforward arguments they've devised is known as the Kalam Cosmological Argument. While its roots stretch back to medieval Islamic philosophy, it was brought into the modern spotlight by the philosopher William Lane Craig. At its heart, it's a simple, three-step piece of logic that you can hold in your mind all at once. It goes like this. First, everything that begins to exist has a cause. Second, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. That's it. It looks clean, simple, and almost obvious. But hidden within that simplicity is a universe of fascinating ideas, scientific evidence, and mind-bending concepts. Let's take a friendly walk through this argument, piece by piece, and see what makes it so compelling to so many people. Let's start with the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. On the surface, this feels like common sense. We live our entire lives seeing this principle in action. A tree begins to exist because a seed was planted and nurtured. A cake begins to exist because a baker mixed flour, sugar, and eggs and put it in an oven. You begin to exist because of your parents. Nothing just pops into being from absolute nothingness for no reason at all. If you were walking in the woods and found a finely crafted watch sitting on a log, you would never assume it just appeared there out of thin air. You would know, intuitively, that a watchmaker made it. This principle that something cannot come from nothing is one of the most fundamental intuitions we have about reality. To deny it is to say that things can just spring into existence without any cause or explanation, which sounds more like a magic trick than a serious description of the world. Now, some people might point to the strange world of quantum physics, where tiny particles seem to pop in and out of existence in the quantum vacuum. This is often brought up as a counterexample. However, philosophers and physicists will point out that this quantum vacuum is not nothing. It's a sea of fluctuating energy governed by the laws of physics. So these particles are not coming from true, absolute nothingness, but rather from a pre-existing physical reality. The first premise then seems to hold up pretty well. It remains for most people more plausible than its opposite. Now for the second and perhaps more controversial premise, the universe began to exist. For a long time, many scientists and philosophers were quite comfortable with the idea of an eternal universe. The thought was that the universe had simply always been here, with no beginning and no end. But over the last century, a wave of discoveries has made this idea much harder to maintain. There are two main lines of evidence, one from philosophy and one from science, that suggest the universe had a starting point. The philosophical argument is a bit of a brain teaser. It argues that an actual infinite number of past events is impossible. Think about it like a line of dominoes. If the line of dominoes stretching into the past were actually infinite, the present domino would never fall because an infinite number of dominoes would have had to fall before it. You can never finish an infinite task. The past, however, is a completed series of events. Since the collection of all past events is finished, it must be finite. Therefore, the past is finite, and the universe must have had a beginning. If that feels a bit too abstract, the scientific evidence is more concrete. The most famous piece of evidence is the Big Bang Theory. By observing that galaxies are all moving away from each other, scientists concluded that the universe is expanding. If we rewind that expansion, like playing a movie in reverse, everything in the universe, all matter, energy, space, and even time itself, crashes together into an unimaginably hot and dense single point. This initial event, the Big Bang, which occurred about 13.8 billion years ago, represents the beginning of the universe as we know it. Another scientific pointer is the second law of thermodynamics. This law basically states that in a closed system, things tend to move from order to disorder. The universe is like a giant wind-up clock that is slowly running down. If the universe had existed for an infinite amount of time, it would have already run down completely. All the stars would have burned out and all the heat would be evenly distributed, resulting in a cold, dead, and motionless state. But that's not what we see. We see a universe full of energy, stars still burning, and galaxies still forming. The clock is still ticking, which strongly suggests it was wound up at a finite time in the past. So, if we accept both premises, that everything that begins to exist has a cause, and that the universe began to exist, the conclusion follows with logical necessity. Therefore, the universe has a cause. This is where things get really interesting. The argument doesn't stop there. By thinking about what it would take to cause a universe, we can start to figure out what this cause must be like. Since the cause brought space and time into existence, it must exist outside of space and time. This means the cause must be spaceless and timeless, or eternal. Since the cause created all matter and energy, it cannot be made of matter or energy itself. It must be immaterial or non-physical. Since the cause created the universe, it must be unbelievably powerful. The sheer force required is beyond human comprehension. And here's a fascinating leap. The cause must be personal. Why? Think about it. How can a timeless, eternal cause produce an effect, the universe, that has a beginning? If the cause were just a mechanical, impersonal set of conditions, then whenever those conditions were met, the effect would have to exist. If the cause were eternal, the effect would be eternal. The only way for an eternal cause to produce a non-eternal effect is if the cause has free will. It must be an agent that can choose to create. This points toward a mind, toward a personal being. So the Kalam argument takes us from a few simple observations about the world to the conclusion that there was a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, incredibly powerful, personal creator of the universe. Of course, this argument isn't a mathematical proof that everyone must accept. It's a piece of philosophical reasoning. People can debate the premises. Maybe our intuition about causality breaks down at the beginning of the universe. Maybe there are other models of the universe that avoid a single beginning. These are all part of the grand, ongoing conversation. But what makes the Kalam argument so enduring is its elegant simplicity and its power to connect our everyday experiences to the biggest questions of existence. It invites us to look at the world around us, at the night sky above us, and to reason our way back to a potential first moment. It suggests that the existence of the universe is not a brute, unexplained fact, but something that points beyond itself to a transcendent cause. It's an intellectual journey that starts with common sense and ends with a glimpse of the sublime.